What's up, everybody? Kevin Fabazy here, talking sports with you today. And I know it's been a little while, but thought I would talk about something that has kind of come up in the NBA media recently surrounding the MVP. And I think the biggest question for everybody is Nikola Jokic really deserving of the MVP this year? If he wins MVP, he'd be a back-to-back MVP, which is an incredibly rare occurrence in NBA history. And you think of Tim Duncan doing that, Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, some of the top all-time greats of all time, and to have him up in that air, I mean, it'd be an incredible accomplishment. And given how this series has gone, the Warriors jumping out to a 3-0 series lead against the Nuggets, and them largely kind of running away with these games against the Nuggets, it gives this kind of aura of like, hey, like if he's really the MVP, shouldn't they be more competitive in these games? Shouldn't they be winning? And I think the short answer is like, look, Nikola Jokic absolutely deserved the MVP this year. People point to his record and the team that only won 48 games this year, and but I mean, if you look at his greatest competitors, Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo, they only won 51 games. They won three more games, and a you know a less competitive Eastern Conference. I mean, a lot of the teams were fairly even in the Eastern Conference, but didn't have the top heavy teams that the West did. And so I think from that standpoint, look, I mean, the teams are relatively similar, but the glaring thing to me is, I mean, you're looking at a Nugget squad that was not at full strength throughout the entire year. Their second best player, Jamal Murray, played 0 games this year. He tore his ACL, I believe, last year and has missed the entire season. Nikola Jokic carried a team that has Aaron Gordon as its second leading scorer to the playoffs in a sixth seed, and is now playing a team that is full of three-time reigning or three-time champions in the Golden State Warriors with Curry, Clay, Draymond, Andre Iguodala. I think anybody, given the circumstances, no matter how great you are, being able to compete with this team is it's an impossible task. And so it's been weird. The dialogue recently has been, well, like, oh, the Nuggets are down 3-0. It's all Jokic's fault. And you look at his stat line, and in the last two games he's had 37 points, average like 13 rebounds in that span, and really carried this team. I mean, he shot 67% from the field in their Game 4 win. He was a +5 in a game that they barely, eked by. But I mean, what do you expect from a guy when he's playing without his second best player and without the third best player in the team? Michael Porter Jr. has been out since early in the year because of back injuries, and look, he's really taken this team on his back and carried them. I mean, it's almost a LeBron-esque performance taking this team to the playoffs. And now, is he at LeBron's level? No, but I don't think there are many in the history of the game that ever reached the heights that LeBron has. But to take this team to 48 wins, to even the accomplishment of winning a game last night against this Warriors team that has looked dominant in these first four playoff games. I mean, if you don't have flashbacks to that 2016, 2015 runs where it was Curry, Clay, Draymond, and Andre Iguodala coming off the bench, I mean, that's what I see. I mean, I think my biggest takeaway from these four games is, look, like Steph Curry looks like Steph Curry, and he's coming off the bench. Klay Thompson looks like the flamethrower that he's always been. Draymond's the most versatile and probably the best defender of this era, hands down. I mean, the guy's all over the floor, making plays left and right, captaining the offense, captaining the defense. And then that's not even to mention the guy who's probably the fourth best player of the team, but has maybe played like the best player in the series, Jordan Poole, looking like a mini Steph Curry. And then you have coming off the bench for these Warriors. I mean, let's just look through the Warriors lineup. I mean, if we go down the list, how if we were to rank the top 10 players, how long does it take to get to a second Nugget on that list? I mean, you start Jokic is probably the best player in the series. Curry, probably Draymond, Poole, Clay, and I mean, then it comes to would you rather have Andrew Wiggins or Aaron Gordon? Well, Andrew Wiggins made an All-Star team this year. I mean, debate all you want whether he should have made it or not, but he's a really good defender. He can score when he wants to. So is Aaron Gordon the sixth best player in the series, seventh best player in the series? And so when you start putting that more into perspective and understanding that he's playing against a three-time champions in these Golden State Warriors, I think it's really all, and it's important to understand that context. I mean, how many players, if you switch their spots, if you put them in place of Jokic, would have fared any better? I mean, maybe Giannis, like, but again, there's only so much one player can do. I mean, Jokic drops in 37-18 in Game 3, and they still lose to the Warriors. They lost by 5. I mean, what are you gonna do? There's not a whole lot you can do as a big guy putting up a stat line like that, shooting 64% from the field, and your team still loses. At some point, there's just not enough help around him. And I mean, if you look back, I know the analytics community has been this big push for Nikola Jokic, and I was leading basically every advanced stat. And there's been this like, oh, pushback. Why do we have to look at advanced analytics? And I think it's important to understand numbers with context. If you just take a number at face value, that doesn't really tell you the story. But if you understand the context for which that number is generated, I think it gives you so much more appreciation for the entire story. It can kind of tell a story that maybe you don't see on the surface. And the point being is when Nikola Jokic was on the floor this year, the Nuggets outscored teams by 21 points per 100 possessions. He had an offensive rating of 126, defensive rating of 105. That's incredible. That is, I believe, far and away the highest in the league. Um, and to be able to perform at that level, I mean, it's incredible. And speaks volumes of, I mean, man, this team only won 48 games and they were outscoring teams by 21 points per 100 possessions with Jokic on the floor. It speaks to how bad they were when he was off. I mean, they were a historically awful team when Jokic would take a break. And so it was basically like, hey, let's get Jokic a small breather, and then he's got to come in and make up all the ground that they lost. And he sat for about 12 minutes a game or 14 minutes a game, and he was constantly trying to claw them back. I mean, if you look at the numbers for this season, it's just staggering. Guy averaged 27 points a game, almost 14 rebounds, 8 assists, and get this, shot 58% from the field. Do you guys understand that level of efficiency? I mean, I get he's a big guy, but he's still scoring 27 a game. I mean, LeBron, historically in his career, has averaged around a 50% field goal shooting percentage, and that's a remarkably high field goal percentage in NBA history. I don't believe he's ever reached 58. I think he was at 56 one year with the Heat. Kobe Bryant, who everybody is this vaunted scorer that everybody loves and adores, I think averaged like 45, 46% for his career. Shoot 58% from the field in an NBA game when you're far and away the best player and defenses, you know, direct all their attention to you night in and night out. I think it speaks volumes. And not only that, to get his teammates involved at the rate he does, rebound, um, you know, Jokic doesn't come off as this incredible defender, but the stats, the advanced stats show that when he was on the floor, regardless of whether it's directly driven by him, correlation or causation, the Nuggets were a really good defensive team with Nikola Jokic on the floor. And look, I mean, everything about this guy screams MVP. He got his teammates involved. Whenever he didn't play, the Nuggets were a disaster. And the minutes he sat, they were a disaster. He was a definition of a most valuable player. And if you look at the two other big candidates for MVP, I mean, look at the how much better the rosters around those guys were. I mean, Giannis team won 51 games coming off of finals, but they had Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Bobby Portis. All these guys are better than arguably than anybody else on the Nuggets. And look, frankly, the Bucks kind of coasted this year. I mean, Giannis played great, but they didn't look like they really cared for part of the regular season, and fair enough to them. I mean, they're the defending champs. They know what it takes to win a championship, and the regular season is not as important for a team like that. If you look at the Sixers, I mean, obviously with the Harden acquisition late in the season, I mean, Harden's far and away better than anybody on the Nuggets, probably better than anybody that Jokic has played with, though Jamal Murray might be better than this version of Harden we're seeing right now, but Murray hasn't played all year. And then going down the list, I mean, Tyrese Maxey's been really good throughout the season, and as much as people love to hate on Tobias Harris, I mean, he's still like a close to 20 point per game scorer on a relatively good efficiency and, can score. I mean, you can't say the same for anybody else on the Nuggets. I mean, Aaron Gordon has shot well from the field this year, but And does he scare anybody as a scorer? He averaged 15 points per game, and he was the second leading scorer for the Nuggets. So I think when you look at it in that context, I mean, the Nuggets somehow only won 3 games less than the Bucks with that loaded roster that went to the finals, than the Sixers, who added a James Harden late in the season for the last 30 games of the playoff push. What Nikola Jokic did this season was remarkable, and it's one of the analytically, if you look at the stats, it's one of the greatest seasons we've seen. And like, I know it's not pretty when he plays. He looks like he's a stumbling, bumbling, giant out there, and somehow he's dropping 27 a game. But man, it's regardless of the play style, regardless of what the quote unquote eye test says, his team won when he was on the floor. His team was better with him on the floor. And man, if he's not the best passer in the NBA, I don't know who is, because that guy makes some incredible passes and makes his teammates better. He's the quintessential teammate, getting players involved, setting screens, doing the dirty work, rebounding the ball, just making a lot of smart, heady plays. And that is what you want in an MVP. That is what defines most valuable player. And I know there's a lot of arguments, is the MVP supposed to go to the most valuable players, or supposed to go to the best player? And yeah, like I think you can make the argument that Giannis is really the best player in the league, but he wasn't in the regular season. Giannis might be the best player in the playoffs. He might be if everybody wanted to vote, they would vote him as the best player in the league. But during the regular season, that player was Nikola Jokic. His numbers far outshine Giannis's. His team performance when he was on the floor was much better than Giannis's than when he was off. I mean, the Bucks were still a decent team without Giannis. When Jokic sat, they utterly collapsed. They were, I think if you, in the minutes that Jokic didn't play, the Nuggets were a bottom of the road team, and like this team would have been lottery bound without Nikola. Like plain and simple, they were not a good competitive team. And so, and I think when you look at it in context, and looking at taking a high level approach, okay, you look at it in 48-34, they're sixth seed in the West. Like, okay, do you really want to give your MVP to a team that only made a sixth seed? But then you look at it, and it's like, look, Jamal Murray didn't play all year. Michael Porter Jr. played like something like 20 games, and yet this team still won 48 games, was a sixth seed in the West, and Nikola Jokic dragged them there, threw the team on his back and said, "Come with me." I mean, look, guys, Bryn Forbes is playing minutes for this team in the playoffs. And as a San Antonio fan, look, we didn't even want him playing during the regular season for our Spurs, who didn't even make the playoffs. So, I mean, that just speaks volumes to the roster. And that's not to hate on Bryn. He's a great situational player, can be a really good shooter. But, I mean, he's not a guy who should be playing, large playoff minutes. He didn't play much down the stretch for the Bucks last year on their championship team. So I think it's really important that we, instead of hating, that we appreciate the greatness when we see it. I think we're really quick as a NBA community to say, look, oh, I don't like this about that player, this about that player. Like Russell Westbrook, when he had those amazing seasons, averaging triple doubles 2 or 3 years in a row. We love to hate him for all of his flaws, but let's just appreciate how great these players are. Not every player is going to win a championship every year. And, looking at the Nuggets with their lack of health, they're not going to win the championship this year. If they even get out of the first round, it would have been a miracle. I mean, the Warriors are the far superior team. They have way more talent than the Nuggets have, at least healthy talent. And the Nuggets really had no business winning this series. The only way they would is if Nikola Jokic just went superhuman and somehow dragged the team through. But realistically, that wasn't going to happen. I mean, the Warriors are experienced playoff veterans, a ton of experience. I mean, they played together for years, or at least that core three, core four, if you throw in Iggy. This team wasn't going to lose to the Nuggets, not in this fashion. So let's just step back and let's appreciate it. We're watching one of the greatest players we've seen play, and an utter unicorn in the truest of senses, and a center that is the leading scorer for a team, that's the best passer on a team, and the best rebounder. I mean, this guy is a 7-footer that is arguably the best passer in the league, and is scoring with remarkably high efficiency. So, anywho, guys, I think it's a fun debate for NBA the NBA media, but I don't think there really is a debate. Nikola Jokic is the MVP, plain and simple.